Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to show you also how to take like 2 tumblers and kind of stick them together. So I've already, and how to make a lip. So I've already added 1 tumbler. So I just had 1 tumbler, and then I had just a chunk of a second tumbler that was a little bit shorter. And just like I did with the other vase with the 2 bowls, I just slipped and scored those together. And now I want to add on a top, okay? So for me, I wanted to do a lip, but I didn't really, like, this looks too small to me. It's not my thing. You know, this was a little bit, it wasn't what I wanted. Like, this one might be okay, but it's a little bit small for the size of this. Like, I could push from the inside and widen this one out to fit on here, because they don't match up exactly. Like there's a gap right here that I'd have to fix, but that's not what I want to do. I want to do something else. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add on some coils. Now I do still have a little bit of shaping from the inside to do to make sure that my shape is nice and even, but I'm starting to run out of time today, so I want to make sure that I get this video done. So I'm not quite shaping quite as much as I would be to make sure that it's even. Like, I haven't stepped back all the way a whole bunch of times, because you can kind of see this side's a little pointier and this side's not. I need to push from the inside to make this a little more even. But I want to add on some coils. So remember, you want to use fresh clay. You can start it in your hand and then roll it on the table. Do the scooping motions, wide fingers. Make sure there's not junk all over your desk, because you really want to make this kind of a motion to make a nice even coil. Okay, now since this coil is joining onto a leather hard object, I'm going to score and slip. Okay, so I'm scoring the coil, and I scored the top of this. Now, if you're just doing coils, depending on your clay, you may or may not have to score every coil. Like, I'm only gonna score the first coil that's attached to the leather hard clay. If your coils are all the same, like they're all wet, then depends on your clay, you know? But like, if you're joining a coil onto something that's not soft, then for sure slip and score. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by kind of adding this on. I already kissed it like a dewdrop fairy. I'm gonna do scoring to scoring, and then when I get here, I don't wanna have a weird, funky spot where like there's not enough clay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut diagonally through both pieces. I'm gonna take off the extra from here, take off the extra from here, and now it matches like perfect, right? So I'm gonna squish these down, and I'm gonna kind of use this shape on my fingers, and I'm just gonna like gently squeeze a little bit of this clay down and around my lip that I scored. This just is gonna help keep this stuck on here. And if your finger gets wet, remember, dry it off. So either keep a paper towel, or like I'm wearing an apron, because I like to just wipe my hands on my apron. But if you're like, ew, that's gross, just get a paper towel. Okay. So I kind of just made sure, I wanted to make sure it was stuck on there real good. Now I'm gonna support from the inside. I'm gonna support, and I'm gonna blend that edge. Okay, so I'm gonna blend this edge on the outside. And like I said, if your finger gets wet, clean it off, okay? Because a wet finger means that you're just gonna be smearing clay around. You're not actually gonna be blending, you're just smearing, okay? So if it starts to get wet, you're not blending. So you gotta get your finger dry again, and then keep going around, all the way around. Now, I'm trying to do this fairly quickly. Normally I would spend a little bit more time like smoothing it real neatly. But like I said, I'm starting to run out of time for the day, and I want to make sure that I get all the videos. Okay, so I was using my finger on the outside, but I was supporting from the inside. Now I'm gonna kind of do the opposite. I'm gonna support from the outside, and I'm gonna use my thumb to blend down on the inside. And I kind of go in opposite directions, like as far as rotating. And one quick tip, if you are doing this on a banding wheel or even on the table, if you just add a little piece of paper in between, like if some water or whatever does get kind of down to the bottom, or if your project is a little bit wet, that will help make sure that it doesn't stick to the banding wheel, because it'd be awful to get like this fabulous, beautiful form and then be like, oh no, my bottom ripped off. So we don't want that to happen. So just put a little piece of paper in between it. And if you haven't done that yet and you're watching me, go do it. Okay, now since I'm making this into a lip, gosh, this banding wheel is so like, doesn't like to turn. I'm going to kind of reshape this just a little bit. I'm gonna make it a little bit skinnier and closer to the thickness of the rest of my vase shape here. And while I'm doing that, I'm also kind of rolling the edge a little bit because I want it to kind of come out a little bit more with like a little bit of a flare. Now, if you're like, oh, this is my jam, Mizzy, look at that. Like, I just like that little lip on there. It's fabulous. Then, you know, stop here. If you're like, I want it a little bit taller, then do it. Just add another coil on there. Now, since I'm joining wet coil to wet coil, I don't need to slip and score again. But if your coils are not super wet coils, or you have a different kind of clay than what I'm using, then do make sure that you slip and score. But so I added this on, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. Now for me personally, I switch back and forth between whether I do the outside and whether I do the inside. Like, I love coils. It's kind of one of my favorite things. So I'm gonna, on this one, I'm gonna start on the inside because it's starting to flare out a little bit. And I'm gonna support from the outside, and I'm gonna use my thumb on the inside to blend this coil into the last one, okay? Now, if your clay is not blending and you're not blending really good, this is just gonna pop off in the kiln, okay? So it's really important that when I say like blending, that you're actually moving clay down. The common mistakes that I see students do though is I'm just taking like the side. Like, here's the top of my thing, and I'm just taking the side and moving the side. Same thing on the inside. Sometimes students want to start with their finger directly on top of the lip and like blend it all the way down. That doesn't work, because then you don't have a lip, right? It makes it too pointy and you can't really make it into anything. So I'm starting with my thumb below the lip when I'm blending, so that way I know. Sorry, this banding wheel does not like to spin. I picked one of the stiffer ones that needs to get oiled. That's okay. Okay, and I'm gonna blend it a little bit more. I'm getting rid of my finger marks from the inside since I'm already here. And now that I've done that, now I'm gonna support from the inside. But this time, since I'm trying to kind of make it flare a little bit, I'm still gonna support from the inside, but I'm using my thumb and kind of pulling this first coil up to blend it in. Now, depending on what your design is, you can actually use these little finger marks as a design element, but it has to look purposeful. You can't just leave the finger marks and be like, because you were feeling lazy, and be like, no, it's supposed to be that way, Missy. It has to look like it was on purpose, okay? It has to be on purpose. So it has to look nice and even if you do that. Now, for me, like I said, I made a slightly wider coil because I knew I was gonna stretch it. And I want this to be a little bit thinner, so it's more like the rest of this. So I'm just kind of pinching the clay as even as I can, kind of a little bit taller. Like this. So now I've got this little flare on here. And if I like this flare, I can leave it. If I'm like, no, I want it to come in a little bit more, I could spend a little bit of time like compressing the inside here. I could make it come in a little bit more if I wanted it to come in a little bit more, and then have it. So I'm just kind of like compressing this way, like squeezing it together, like the pimple thing that we talk about all the time in this class, because that's what it is, right? Okay. So we could do, if I need it to come a little narrower, you can do small changes, not huge ones, but you can do small ones. So that's how I'm adding on a coil lip to a molded, you know, or slab-based vase. All right, thanks everybody. Be creative, do something awesome and amazing. Thanks everybody.